Good morning. No. Good morning. All right. Welcome to the 31st Annual MLK Day Symposium here at the University of Michigan. My name is Robert Sellers. I'm Vice Provost for Equity and Inclusion, as well as the Chief Diversity Officer for the university. It is my great pleasure to host this morning's event. The University of Michigan's celebration of MLK Day in the form of its MLK Symposium represents one of the most extensive commemorations of the life legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King occurring anywhere in the world today. In addition to this morning's program, there are scores of other events occurring on our campus in celebration of MLK Day. Many of these events you can find in the booklets that have been handed out. I strongly encourage you and invite you to attend as many of those events as possible. We have a really exciting program today. This year's theme is Sounds of Change. The format of today's program is a bit different from previous years. It includes formal remarks, a free-flowing interview, singing, and dancing. Perhaps some laughter, perhaps some tears. I think you'll enjoy it. Before we get started with the program, I do want to take this opportunity to welcome those of you who are watching today's symposium on our live stream feed, including those of you who are at the Detroit Center, as well as those who are at the various overflow auxiliary facilities on campus. See me? Let's wave. I would also like to take this time to acknowledge and welcome a special group of high school students and their parents who are in attendance today here at Hill Auditorium. With the students and parents from Southfield and Ypsilanti who are here as part of the Gear Up program, please stand. The Gear Up program is a pre-college enrichment program administered by our Office of Academic Multicultural Initiatives. As I mentioned earlier, we have a really full and exciting program today. So why don't we go ahead and get started? First up are some opening remarks by our president. Dr. Mark S. Schlissel is the 14th president of the University of Michigan. In his short 2.5-year tenure as president, he has consistently articulated a belief that while talent is equally distributed in our society, opportunity is not. He has also made it his personal mission to address this paradox. And this personal commitment can best be seen in his commitment to making the University of Michigan more diverse, more equitable, and more inclusive as a community. And the best evidence of that is his championing and his directing of resources to the university's diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic planning process. He's been a wonderful partner to work with. He's also been a friend. It is my great pleasure to introduce President Mark S. Schlissel for our opening remarks.
Thank you, Vice Provost Sellers, for that very kind introduction, but more importantly, for all of your work and dedication to the University of Michigan. Last fall, we were pleased to unveil the university's comprehensive strategic plan for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and Rob's outstanding leadership was essential to that effort. We're also proud to appoint him as the first Chief Diversity Officer in the history of the University of Michigan. I'd also like to thank you all for joining us today in one of our nation's largest celebrations of Dr. King's life and work. It's an honor to be here for the University of Michigan's 31st annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Symposium. I want to express my utmost gratitude to the faculty, students, and staff all across the campus who've made this symposium so special, including the University of Michigan Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Symposium Planning Committee, the Office of Academic Multicultural Initiatives, and of course our special guests, Amy Goodman and Issa Rae. That was almost a Coach Harbaugh scale applause. This morning's other speakers and performers I'd like to thank, and the individuals throughout our campus who are holding events as part of the symposium this week and for the coming weeks. One of those is our annual Youth Day event, which is taking place today until 3 in the Modern Languages building directly behind Hill. It's coordinated by one of our outstanding scholars and leaders, Dr. Henry Mears, in our School of Education. I also thank everyone who is using this important keynote to engage with issues or to teach via our live stream. This year, the University of Michigan is commemorating its bicentennial and our almost 200 years of achievement as a public university. Over the course of 2017, we'll be celebrating U of M's amazing impact on society and the people and moments that helped shape the institution we are today. One of those moments came 55 years ago when the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. came to our campus. His 1962 visit included a meeting in the Michigan Union on civil disobedience and 2 lectures right here in Hill Auditorium during a momentous and challenging time for our nation. The 6 themes of our bicentennial are designed to help us honor the university's legacies and leadership in the most important issues facing society. The themes are serving the people, pursuing ideas, creating and inventing, teaching powerfully, challenging society, and forever hailing. The University of Michigan's role in advancing civil rights is an indelible part of our history with deep ties to each of our bicentennial themes. Throughout our 200-year history, members of our community have led the way and made landmark contributions during this journey toward equality. Our bicentennial would be much less historic without their efforts and commitment. So, as we honor our first 2 centuries and begin a third, let us use this occasion to both celebrate and learn from those who came before. We can celebrate and learn from the student activists who have demonstrated that we must do better, and we must never forget that the fight for justice is ongoing. We should honor the researchers who proved that there's a compelling need for diversity in higher education and that a university cannot achieve true academic excellence without tapping into the rich diversity of the public it serves. I want to honor the members of our community who have persevered in their support of diversity over many decades through court cases and changes in the law because it's the right thing to do. I hope that our university, the University of Michigan, will always be known for social change, with students, faculty, staff, and alumni who envision a better, more just world and who want to help lead us there. Likewise, I hope that we'll always learn and listen to those whose voices and actions created the sounds of change. The sounds of change we're examining with the theme statement of this year's MLK Symposium. These sounds resonate among us all and remind us of the work that still needs to be done. I'm proud that the University of Michigan is a place that can unite a diverse array of talents, people, and perspectives in service of social justice. As the theme statement says, Dr. King realized that the preservation of a nation is based on how willing and often its citizens play their instruments in harmony. This quality is perhaps our most important strength as we work to seek greater levels of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Together, we are creating the sounds of change that will truly and fully let freedom ring. Here at the University of Michigan, we're home of students who speak out against hatred and discrimination. We have scholars like Professor Martha Jones, who's using the bicentennial to stimulate thinking about those moments in the university's history when we did not lead the way for equality. And Eugene Rogers, who directed the Michigan Men's Glee Club's acclaimed performance of 7 Last Words of the Unarmed. We have innovations like the Youth Civil Rights Academy, which uses a digital portal to teach high schoolers about civil rights, allows them to share their experiences with one another, and learn how to affect change. And our Poverty Solutions Initiative, which tomorrow will announce research grants to help develop and test interventions to alleviate poverty in several of our region's communities. I know there are many, many more individuals at the University of Michigan who are helping to define our third century as a public university. I want to thank everyone who's helping us uphold our shared belief that diversity, equity, and inclusion are key to individuals' flourishing, to educational excellence, and to the advancement of knowledge at our great university. We must work together to advance and articulate these cherished Michigan values into our third century and beyond. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, President Schlissel, for those inspiring remarks. In this country, we often begin large gatherings, such as major sporting events or events like this, with the singing of the national anthem. However, recent events have led to a more thorough interrogation of the cultural and political meaning of this practice. In keeping with this year's theme of the MLK Day celebration, Sounds of Change, we will hear a special rendition of the national anthem. This special rendition may cause you to re-examine your own view of this most patriotic of practices. But before we hear the special rendition, Dr. Mark Clegg will provide some framing remarks before introducing our special performers. Dr. Clegg is an associate professor of musicology in the School of Music, Theater, and Dance. His most recent publication is entitled, "Oh Say Can You Hear? A Cultural Biography of the Star-Spangled Banner." Please welcome to the stage Dr. Mark Clegg.
When he began kneeling during renditions of the U.S. national anthem, NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick recruited the Star-Spangled Banner as a vehicle for protest. His act sparked a national conversation, changing a game day routine into a weekly reminder that for too many Americans, the dream of justice remains elusive. Yet Kaepernick's use of the anthem as protest is not new, but rather a vital component of the anthem's own 200-year American history. In writing the lyric we know today as the Star-Spangled Banner, Francis Scott Key joined a lyrical conversation called the broadside ballad tradition. This common 18th and 19th century social practice invited amateur poets to write new lyrics to well-known melodies. These new words were published on single sheets of paper, known as broadsides, hence the name, the broadside ballad. They could go viral, reprinted again and again in newspapers across the nation. While we only remember one today, my research into the history of the United States anthem has recovered more than 100 different sets of lyrics that Americans have sung to the tune we recognize as only the Star-Spangled Banner. These broadside ballads not only celebrate, they criticize, and they protest. As sounds of change, these songs put heart and soul behind their arguments in a social justice symphony that imagines, debates, and reimagines what it means to be American. Some of these star-spangled lyrics demanded the right to vote for women. One helped elect President Abraham Lincoln. Others pray for enduring peace during times of endless war. By far the most riveting lyric among all I've found to date is one titled, "Oh Say, Do You Hear?" a song that invokes the horrors of slavery in a nation that claims to be free. This 1844 anti-slavery lyric was written just west of here by Dr. E.A. Atlee of Battle Creek, Michigan. Atlee was a station master in Michigan's Underground Railroad. He sheltered and helped guide escaped slaves through the Midwest to freedom in Canada. His powerful lyric was first published right here in Ann Arbor in a local abolitionist newspaper titled The Signal of Liberty. The song, which you'll hear in a few moments, performed by School of Music, Theater, and Dance Master Student of Voice Cameron Gray and pianist Paula Savidou, attained national prominence when it was reprinted by activist William Lloyd Garrison in his abolitionist newspaper, The Liberator. Atlee's words refract Key's already famous lyric to question how a nation can be celebrated as, quote, the land of the free, end quote, while some 4 million of its people remain in chains. Why is it important to hear Atlee's lyric today, on this day when we celebrate the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Today, when we have long forgotten the more than 100 conflicting lyrics sung to the tune of the Star-Spangled Banner throughout America's history, we may mistakenly think of the song and the nation it represents as things absolute and unchangeable. However, a song, as well as a nation, must be animated by people. A song must be sung. A nation must be led. Both song and nation are thus living expressions, expressions of an unchanging past, an urgent present, but also a future that is up to us, a future that we must sing into being. A lyric such as "Oh Say, Do You Hear?" reminds us that creativity and passion can give voice to the silenced. They can create change. They can inspire harmony. Although more than 150 years old, Atlee's Song for Freedom challenges us this day. It challenges us to reimagine what it means to live here and to live now. It challenges each of us to write and to sing our own new song of the nation. So as I turn the stage over to Cameron and Paula, let me offer a reminder and a charge. First, while "Oh Say, Do You Hear" sounds like the national anthem, it is not precisely the national anthem, so there's no tradition of standing to this song, even as we honor Atlee's vision of freedom and justice. My charge to you, however, is to engage with the visceral language and passion of this lyric, which is printed on the back of your program. Please absorb the pain and the hope expressed, and then listen for the cries of injustice in our own world today and strive to make a difference. Oh, say, what do you hear?
Oh, say, do you hear at the dawn's early light the shrieks of those bondmen whose blood is now streaming from the merciless lash, while our banner in sight, with its stars marking freedom, is fitfully gleaming. Do you see the backs bare? Do you mark every score of the whip of the driver? Trace channels of gore, and say, doth our star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Shall we ne'er hail the day when as free men shall stand? The millions who groan under matchless oppression shall liberty shouts in our heaven-rescued land ne'er be shed by the slave in our blood-guilty nation. Oh, let us be just, ere in God we dare trust, else the day will o'ertake us when perish we must, and our star-spangled banner at half-mast shall wave o'er the deathbed of freedom, the home of the slave.
Now that was powerful. It is now my pleasure to invite to the stage Alyssa Brandon, who will do the honors of introducing our keynote speakers. Alyssa Brandon is an undergraduate student in our College of Literature, Science, and Arts. She is majoring in communication studies with a minor in Japanese language and culture. Alyssa is a former senior news editor for the Michigan Daily and a former senior editor for Michigan in Color. Please join me in giving her a warm welcome.
It is my pleasure to introduce the 2017 University of Michigan Martin Luther King Jr. Symposium Keynote lecturers, Amy Goodman and Issa Rae. I'm particularly excited to introduce our speakers because I admire them so much as writers and storytellers. Considering my work as a former senior news editor for the Michigan Daily and a former senior editor for Michigan in Color, I appreciate Amy Goodman and Issa Rae for sharing stories that are sometimes difficult to express. Stories that expose harsh realities but are necessary to build empathy and to encourage others to be unapologetically authentic. Their work inspires writers like me to continue our fight for justice and inclusion. And today, I'm confident our two uniquely phenomenal keynote speakers will inspire you too. First, I will introduce Amy Goodman. Amy Goodman is an award-winning investigative journalist, author, and syndicated columnist, and the host of Democracy Now!, which just celebrated its 20th anniversary and airs on more than 800 public television and radio stations worldwide. A true hero of real news, she has worked tirelessly from the front lines during the world's most revolutionary moments to produce groundbreaking news coverage. From the independence movement in East Timor in 1991 to the Dakota Access Pipeline protests at Standing Rock Indian Reservation in North Dakota just last year. As a result, Goodman is a recipient of several awards and honors in and outside of journalism, such as the Right Livelihood Award, widely known as the Alternative Nobel Prize. She is the 1998 recipient of the George Polk Award for the radio documentary she co-produced, Drilling and Killing, Chevron in Nigeria's Oil Dictatorship, which exposed the oil company's role in the killing of 2 Nigerian villagers in May of 1998. Goodman also won numerous awards for the radio documentary she co-produced from her coverage in East Timor, including the Robert F. Kennedy Prize for International Reporting, the Alfred I. DuPont Columbia Silver Baton, the Armstrong Award, and more. She is the author of 4 New York Times bestsellers, and her latest book, Democracy Now!, 20 Years Covering the Movements Changing America, looks back over the past 2 decades of Democracy Now! And the powerful movements and charismatic leaders who are reshaping our world. Goodman's work demonstrates the power of independent journalism and the struggle for a better world. Everyone, please join me in welcoming one of the heroes of journalism, Amy Goodman.
Thank you. It is such a great honor to be here. And I really look forward to interviewing Issa Rae in just a little bit. For those of you who haven't heard of Democracy Now!, yes, we started 20 years ago on 9 community radio stations, 5 of those Pacifica Radio. Pacifica Radio, founded in 1949 in Berkeley, California, KPFA, by a war resistor who came out of the detention camps and said there has to be a media outlet not run by corporations that profit from war, but run by journalists and artists. And that's how Pacifica was born. As George Gerbner, the former dean at the Annenberg School of Communications at the University of Pennsylvania, would say, not run by corporations that have nothing to tell and everything to sell that are raising our children today. And so Pacifica was born. KPFA in Berkeley, 49, KPFK in Los Angeles, 1959, my station in New York, WBAI in 1960, WPFW in Washington, 1977, and KPFT in Houston, 1970. That's the only radio station, KPFT in the Petro Metro of Houston, the only radio station whose transmitter was blown up. They went on the air in the spring of 1970, and within a few weeks, the Ku Klux Klan strapped dynamite to the base of the transmitter and blew it to smithereens. When they got back on their feet and rebuilt the transmitter, the Klan strapped 15 times the dynamite to the base of the transmitter and blew it up again. Oh, they blew it up in the middle of Arlo Guthrie singing Alice's Restaurant, which I thought was a good song, but... So then they work for months to rebuild, and in January of 1971, it's a national event. They're going back on the air. Arlo Guthrie comes back to Houston to finish his song live on the air, and that phoenix rises from the ashes, and it's still broadcast today. I can't remember if it was the Grand Dragon or the Exalted Cyclops, because I often confuse their titles, but he said it was his proudest act, blowing up the Pacifica station. I think because he understood how dangerous independent media is. Dangerous because it allows people to speak for themselves. And when you hear someone speaking from their own experience, whether it's a Palestinian child or an Israeli grandmother, whether it's an uncle in Afghanistan, an aunt in Iraq, whether it's a young person from Ferguson or someone poisoned in Flint, when you hear someone speaking from their own experience, it challenges the stereotypes. I'm not saying you'll agree with them. I mean, how often do we even agree with our family members? But you begin to understand where they're coming from. It makes it much less likely that you'll want to destroy them. That understanding is the beginning of peace. I think the media can be the greatest force for peace on earth. Instead, all too often, it's wielded as a weapon of war, which is why we have to take the media back. Now, I just told you a story of history, you know, the Klan blowing up the radio station more than 40 years ago. I cannot believe in 2017 we are still talking about the Ku Klux Klan today. How is it possible? When the president-elect Donald Trump was running for president, he was asked about disavowing support from David Duke, a former Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan and Klan chapters, whether he would do that. And he said he'd have to think about it. When was the last time you heard Donald Trump say he had to think about anything before he commented on it? But on this issue, he had to weigh it. What was it that he had to weigh? Which Klan chapter in the United States it was? This is extremely serious. As we talk about the Ku Klux Klan, even in the last week, watching the confirmation hearings, you know, Democracy Now!, which began on 9 radio stations 20 years ago, now broadcasting on over 1,400 public television and radio stations around the country and around the world. Simply a news station picking us up every week, simply a testament to the hunger for independent voices, people describing their own experience. But to be there watching these hearings, the confirmation hearings of the various cabinet picks, let's go to Senator Sessions. The first of the confirmation hearings in the Senate Judiciary Committee, the very same committee who 30 years ago rejected Senator Sessions, at the time not senator, but President Reagan had nominated him for a federal judgeship. And when a president nominates a federal judge, at that time, in 1986, the fact that he was denied by the Senate Judiciary Committee, that it happened only once before in the previous half century. So what was the controversy all about in 1986, 30 years ago? That was raised again this past week. When Senator Sessions was U.S. Attorney in Alabama, he presided over the indictment of leading voting rights activists. Oh, Evelyn and Albert Turner. Albert Turner, close ally of Dr. King, marched with him, and they were considered the leading voting rights activists in the Black Belt of Alabama, where for years no African Americans voted. They had brought the number up to something like 70,000, and so they were indicted for voting rights fraud. Even the judge at the time threw out half the charges before the trial, and then the jury acquitted them of all remaining charges. It was that indictment, that trial, that led so many of the Democrats and the Republicans in the Senate Judiciary Committee to say no. It was Ted Kennedy at the time the senator from Massachusetts, who said, Mr. Sessions is a throwback to a shameful era, which I know both black and white Americans thought was in our past. It's inconceivable to me that a person of this attitude is qualified to be a U.S. attorney, let alone a United States federal judge. The quotes that were raised at the time, the deep concern that Senator Sessions, that Jeff Sessions had called the NAACP and the ACLU un-American, had talked about the Klan saying, and this is just being quoted today in the New York Times, saying he thought the Klan was okay till he learned they smoked pot. He was turned down by the Senate Judiciary Committee. And so the rage of so many when they heard he would be the chief law enforcer of the land, enforcing the law for whom? And so in the 2 days of hearings, at the end of them, a historic moment took place, which many said should have taken place at the beginning. A sitting senator challenged another sitting senator in a confirmation hearing. Never before happened. New Jersey Senator Cory Booker spoke out. He was followed by Congressmember John Lewis, the icon of the civil rights movement. Congressmember Cedric Richmond, who also spoke, said, I want to express my concern about being made to testify at the very end of the witness panels, to have a senator, a House member, a living civil rights legend testify at the end of all of this is the equivalent of being made to go to the back of the bus. You see, when a senator or a congressman wants to testify in a hearing, they are accorded the privilege of testifying first. And so there they were at the end. Only one Republican senator on the Judiciary Committee remained to hear their testimony. Senator Sessions was born in Selma, Alabama. His name steeped in the Confederacy. Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, named for his father and his grandfather. That name, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions. Jefferson for Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy. Beauregard, General Pierre Beauregard, who quit West Point when the Confederacy seceded to oversee the opening salvo of the Civil War, the firing on Fort Sumter. Selma, Alabama. And that also brings us to this weekend and how honored I am to be here on Martin Luther King Day, honoring the great civil rights, human rights leader. Selma, Alabama, John Lewis. You may have heard about the Twitter war over the weekend, but wars have two sides. It was the president-elect, preparing to become president this week, took the time to attack John Lewis, icon of the civil rights movement, many-term member of Congress, who this past week said on NBC he did not consider Donald Trump to be a legitimate president. In response, Donald Trump tweeted that he represents a crime-infested district and that Congressman Lewis is all talk, no action. So we engage in Democracy Now! In fact-based journalism. I can't even believe that term is being used today, as if there is another kind. But let's go back to the historical record. All talk, no action. March 7th, 1965, Bloody Sunday. A young man named John Lewis, one of the organizers of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, led 600 other voting rights activists. This was just days after yet another young African-American man had been killed by police. This was back in 1965. Led voting rights activists over the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. Edmund Pettus Bridge, named for the U.S. Senator, Confederate soldier, former Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. Led the voting rights activists over the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and they were attacked by Alabama state troopers. This nonviolent group was met by massive force. John Lewis would not stop. His head, his skull was fractured, and he continued with these marches. Dr. Wood King would join on the second attempt and the third successful attempt to march from Selma to Montgomery. No matter what your political persuasion, it is hard to describe John Lewis as a man who does not take action. I'm so excited to be speaking with Issa Rae today, who represents a huge challenge and has broken through so many glass ceilings in her work. I want to talk about the importance of culture and resistance. On March 21st, 1915, more than 100 years ago, a motion picture was screened for the first time inside the White House. President Woodrow Wilson sat down to watch D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation. The film, considered one of the most nakedly racist of all time, falsifies the history of Reconstruction, depicting African Americans freed from slavery as the dominant, violent, oppressive group. Wilson said of the film, "It's like writing history with lightning. My only regret is that it is all so terribly true," the president said. The film would serve as a powerful recruiting tool for the KKK. 100 years later, another film was screened at the White House, this time at the invitation of the first African American president. The film was Selma. The film's director, Ava DuVernay, watched it with the first couple. I met with her at the Sundance Film Festival, where I'm headed in a few weeks, in Park City, Utah. In 2012, she was the first African-American woman to win the festival's Best Director award for a previous film. She said it was so beautiful to be in the White House in 2015 with a film like Selma, knowing that in 1915, the first film to ever unspool at the White House was The Birth of a Nation. Selma, the story of one of the key moments in the civil rights movement. You know that story, Selma to Montgomery, the march led by none other than John Lewis, police beating and bloodying him, fracturing his skull. DuVernay's film put that march into historical context. She said, "Selma's the story of justice and dignity. It's about these everyday people. That's what I loved about it. It's about the power of the people." It is also the film about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who played a central role in organizing the marches. She said, "There's been no major motion picture released by a studio, no independent motion picture in theaters with King at the center in the 50 years since these events happened, when we have biopics of all kinds of ridiculous people and nothing on King." Ava said, "No cinematic representation that's meaningful and centered, so it was just something," she said, "I couldn't pass up." How important it is to honor Dr. King today. I was here at the University of Michigan just a few years ago on the 50th anniversary of the first teach-in around the Vietnam War. The first in the country happened right here at the University of Michigan. An educational act of resistance. I was here with the late, great Tom Hayden, who just recently died, who was one of the most critical organizers of that, and was a graduate of the University of Michigan, editor of the Michigan Daily. And that's what I want to speak to when it comes to the legacy of Dr. King and his bravery in so many ways. In 1967, April 4th, 1 year to the day before he was assassinated, Dr. King took to the stage, the podium at the Riverside Church in New York, where we just celebrated our 20th anniversary. The Riverside Church, an historic place, thousands packed in to hear the great civil rights leader. He was speaking out for one of the first times against the war in Vietnam. He was warned even by his inner circle, Martin, don't do this. You've got the President of the United States, the most powerful person on earth, wrapped around your finger. You got him to sign the Civil Rights Act in 64, the Voting Rights Act in 65. This is not your war. Do not alienate him. And he said no. He saw the war as part of a seamless web. And he addressed the audience. And he said about the country he loved, about the United States, his own country, he said it's the greatest purveyor of violence on earth. He was castigated. The mainstream press went after him. I have the Life magazine issue, the Washington Post and other papers. They said he sounded like he was reading a script out of a transcript from Radio Hanoi, that he had done a disservice to his cause, his country, and his people. To which he simply doubled down and kept on speaking out against the war, saying, I cannot possibly speak out against the violence in the ghettos in this country and not speak out against what is happening abroad. Against, he sadly said, my country, the greatest purveyor of violence on earth. A year later, April 4th, 1968, he would go to Memphis to march with sanitation workers who were simply trying to organize a local of AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees. And he was gunned down at the Lorraine Motel. A man who never feared speaking out, standing up. One of the women who really was responsible for his launch onto the main stage of this country, yes, women, was Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks, who on December 1st, 1955, sits down on the bus in Montgomery, Alabama, and she launches the modern-day civil rights movement. You might say, why tell her story now? It's one story we know so well, but the media gets even her story wrong. A few years ago, when Rosa Parks died, we at Democracy Now! Raced down to Washington. She was the first African-American woman to lay in state in the Capitol Rotunda. Then her body was brought to a local church before the huge funeral in Detroit. And there were thousands of people. Oprah was inside. Cicely Tyson was inside. And thousands were outside. They had erected large loudspeakers, and it's often more interesting to be outside. So we're interviewing people. We asked a college freshman, a young woman, why are you out here? And she said, I emailed my professors this morning. She said, I told them I won't be in class. I'm going to get an education. And as we went down to Washington, I remember CNN talking about her. Every network talked about her, no question. But they got it wrong. They said Rosa Parks was a tired seamstress. That was true. They said she was no troublemaker. That was wrong. Rosa Parks was a first-class troublemaker. She knew exactly what she was doing. Rosa Parks was the secretary of the local NAACP in Montgomery. She worked under E.D. Nixon. He was the president of the local NAACP. He came out of radical labor politics. He had organized with perhaps the greatest organizer of the 20th century, A. Philip Randolph, who would go on to, with Bayard Rustin, the black, gay, pacifist activist, organize the 1963 March on Washington. Well, A. Philip Randolph and E.D. Nixon organized the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, the thousands of black conductors on the Pullman trains, all named George. Well, I mean, not named by their mothers, but that's what the passengers would call them, George, named for the owner of the Pullman trains, George Pullman, which shows you why they wanted to be organized. And so E.D. Nixon, radical labor politics, and Rosa Parks had been organizing for years to challenge the racist laws of the South. She went to the Highlander Center to train, where black and white together were working to strategize. I talked to Pete Seeger just before he died, and he talked about perfecting We Shall Overcome, the song at Highlander. And he described how Dr. King once came into Highlander when he was just finishing the song, and he asked Pete to sing it for him, and he sang it. And Dr. King went away, and he said to his friend, "That's a catchy tune." It becomes the anthem of the modern-day civil rights movement. But Rosa Parks knew exactly what she was doing. She was an activist, and the media denigrates activists. But what can be more noble than dedicating your life to making the world a better place? If you're involved in social change, you help to build a foundation so that when a moment comes that you cannot predict, you have built a foundation that will help determine the future, that will make history. That's what Rosa Parks was doing for years. You know, she sat down on the bus before and refused to get up, as other young women had. But this was the magic moment. December 1st, 1955, she sits down on the bus. She is arrested. Her friend Joanne Robinson starts, at the time it was mimeographing thousands of leaflets to begin the bus boycott. The Montgomery Improvement Association has its meeting December 5th, 1955, a few days later when Rosa's in court, and they choose as their leader a young minister who just moved into town, Dr. Martin Luther King. They launched the bus boycott. Within a year, the transportation system is integrated. Dr. King makes history. Rosa Parks, how incredibly brave this woman was. Because just go back a few months before she sat down on that bus. It's the summer of Emmett Till. Emmett Till, a 14-year-old boy from Chicago. He's the only child of his mother, Mamie Till. And she doesn't want him in the city for the summer, so she sends him to Money, Mississippi to be with his aunt and uncle and his cousins. And one night he's ripped out of bed by a white mob. He's tortured, he's beaten, he ends up in the bottom of the Tallahatchie River. They said he wolf whistled at a white woman. Emmett had a stutter. And his mother taught him, before you speak, when you feel that stutter coming on, whistle. When his body was dredged up and sent back to Chicago for the funeral, his mother did something incredibly courageous. She said she wanted the casket open for the wake and the funeral. She wanted the world to see the ravages of racism, the brutality of bigotry. And so thousands streamed by and saw. And then Jet Magazine and other black publications took photographs of his mutilated, distended head, and they were actually published. And they were ingrained into the history of this country. Mamie Till had something very important to teach the press of today. Show the pictures. Show the images. Could you imagine if for just 1 week we saw the images of war, which continues? Afghanistan, the longest war in U.S. history, continues, even in Iraq and Syria and Yemen. If we saw the images of war, if we saw the front page of the papers every day, just imagine for 1 week of a child dead on the ground and a story about what happened to her and her family. If we, at the top of every TV and radio newscast, we heard the story of a woman in Yemen, her legs blown off by a cluster bomb or by a drone strike, who she was, why she was in this wedding party, who was getting married. If we saw those images of a soldier dead and dying for just 1 week, Americans are a compassionate people. They would say, no, war is not the answer to conflict in the 21st century. Showing the images, why it is so important to support and to engage in independent journalism. This past Labor Day weekend, the Democracy Now! Team went to North Dakota to cover the standoff at Standing Rock. I dare say, if Dr. Martin Luther King were alive today, he would have also gone there in this past year. The standoff at Standing Rock is about a pipeline, the $3.8 billion Dakota Access Pipeline that takes fracked oil from the Bakken oil fields of North Dakota through South Dakota, through Iowa to Illinois, and then hooks up with a pipeline to the Gulf of Mexico. And it goes around Native American land, the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation in North Dakota. The people of Mandan in North Dakota said no. The people of Bismarck, the capital, said no. The Native Americans are just saying, treat us like any other North Dakotans. But the energy company, the Energy Transfer Partners, is trying to build this pipeline under the Missouri River, the longest river in North America, and the people of Standing Rock are saying no. And what we are seeing now is the largest unification of Native American tribes in decades. From Latin America, the United States, from Canada. April 1st, the first resistance camp, the Sacred Stone Camp, started by, the informal historian of the Standing Rock Sioux, LaDonna Brave Bull Allard. She opened her property and said, come to the banks of the Cannonball River and resist. And then hundreds, and then thousands, and more camps grew up. And that is the standoff. So we went to see what was happening. We cover the movements changing this country and changing the world. And what we found horrified us. It was a weekend, a holiday weekend. The people did not expect the Dakota Access Pipeline Company to be building. They were going to plant their tribal flags in an area they considered their sacred ground. We were filming as we went up. And then they saw the bulldozers at full tilt digging their sacred ground. They had just given a map of that ground to the judge who had shared it with the company. And the company the next day, because the judge was going to rule in a few days, leapfrogged over where they were working and went after the sites that the Native Americans had identified. And the people said no. And they came up on the property, they pushed back those bulldozers, incredibly brave, just standing there nonviolently saying no, and the bulldozers pulled back, and then the pipeline guards released dogs. They unleashed dogs and pepper spray on the Native Americans. We just kept filming. We showed a dog with its mouth and its nose dripping with blood, Native American blood. It was horrifying. Even the dogs would pull back, and the guards would push them into the crowd. But ultimately, the Native Americans would not stop, even as they were bleeding, even as they were bit, and the Dakota Access Pipeline guards had to pull back. We went back, posted the video online that Labor Day weekend this past September. And within 48 hours, On Facebook, there were 14 million views. Democracy Now!, we broadcast the images of the dogs and the horror of people around the world. The networks, CNN, CBS, NBC, ABC, Al Jazeera, MSNBC, BBC homepage, the global homepage, Canadian Broadcasting, native sites all over the world ran the video footage over and over. Show the images. President Obama was in Asia that week, not asked by a U.S. journalist, but by a young Malaysian woman who saw the video and the pictures online. What is happening with the Dakota Access Pipeline? He said he would come back to the States and find out. And that weekend, when the judge ruled against the tribe, the Obama administration said no. They would stop the drilling for a moment to evaluate. And on December 5th, they released their final decision that the final permit would not be granted for now under the Missouri, which is water for more than 10 million people. And yet hundreds and hundreds, over 500 Native Americans and their allies have been arrested. And when we put out that video, came back to New York, a few days later, the North Dakota authorities issued an arrest warrant for me. I didn't take it personally, because I thought it was a message to all journalists: do not come to North Dakota, which is exactly what all journalists needed to do, is to go there and to show the images. We went back to challenge the charges a month later, and as we flew into Bismarck, the prosecutor admitted he didn't have any grounds for the charge and dropped it, though he would recharge me with riot. I asked my local North Dakota lawyer, what does that mean? He said it would only mean a month to a year in prison. I don't know about his life, but that mattered to me. The weekend, we covered what was happening in October, and a judge had to rule on whether the charges would be brought against me the next day. And because of the international attention, when the international spotlight shines on an issue that matters, the people's resistance, that day on Monday, the judge said he wouldn't sign off on the charges against me, and also dropped felony charges against a number of Native Americans who were being brought up on charges. The chair of the Standing Rock Sioux, Dave Archambault, he had been arrested in the months before. The pediatrician on the Standing Rock Reservation, deeply concerned about her tribe's health, she was arrested for civil disobedience. And all of them, though in other cases people would just get summons, the Native Americans were brought into the jail. The president, the pediatrician, all of the others were strip searched and put in orange jumpsuits, the repeated humiliation. But as I end up this talk, I think about Winona LaDuke and speaking to her that day of the dogs. Winona LaDuke of the White Earth Reservation in Minnesota, who was there, who said, I am not going to spend the next 10 years of my life fighting pipeline after pipeline. Though it remains to be seen what will happen if the cabinet pick for the Secretary of State is confirmed. The CEO of ExxonMobil, Rex Tillerson, who even Mr. Trump calls Mr. Exxon. The Department of Energy, the choice, Governor Rick Perry of Texas, who, when he stepped down as governor, within 2 weeks went on the board of Energy Transfer Partners, the company that runs the Dakota Access Pipeline. Winona LaDuke stood amongst the teepees and the resistance camps, and she said to Jack Dalrymple, the Republican governor of North Dakota, she said, this is my message. You are not George Wallace. This is not Alabama. This is 2016, she said. Think Birmingham, the dogs, Selma, the amazingly brave young John Lewis, and the other hundreds of marchers. This is the history that we must remember. This is the history we must relearn. And we need a media that gives voice to all of the movements today. The Black Lives Matter movement, the environmental justice movement, the gay, lesbian, trans, queer movement, the peace, the war and peace movement, all of these movements that are making this country great. I'll end back in World War II. A brother and sister named Hans and Sophie Scholl. They weren't Jewish, they were German Christians, but they thought, what can we do in the face of the Nazi atrocity? They decided to put out pamphlets with their professor and other students so that the Germans would never be able to say, we didn't know. And they published a series of 6 pamphlets. On one of them were written the words, we will not be silent. They had them spread everywhere, in alleyways, in schoolyards, in marketplaces, under cover of night. But they were caught by the Nazis, Hans and Sophie and their professor. They were charged, they were tried, they were convicted, and they were beheaded. But that philosophy, that motto, should be the Hippocratic oath of the media today, should be the Hippocratic oath of us all today. We will not be silent. Democracy Now!
Thank you, Amy Goodman, for those amazing opening remarks. I especially appreciate the way that you've connected events of the past to events of the present, and I think it's important for us as a community to understand the link between the two as we process and respond to our current socio-political climate. Please join me in giving Amy Goodman another round of applause. Now I will introduce Issa Rae. Issa Rae is a critically acclaimed and world-renowned actress, writer, and producer. With her own unique flair and infectious sense of humor, Issa Rae's content has garnered over 20 million views and 200,000 YouTube subscribers and counting. She won the Shorty Award for Best Web Show for her hit series, The Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl, and has written a New York Times bestseller under the same title. She has since expanded her YouTube platform to feature various content created by people of color. Issa Rae's distinctive style and glowing black girl magic has captured the hearts of millions and has caused her to receive national attention from major media outlets, including the New York Times, Rolling Stone, Essence, Vibe, and others. In addition to making Glamour magazine's 35 Under 35 list, as well as Forbes' 30 Under 30 list, she has earned a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actress in a TV comedy or musical for her performance in HBO's Insecure, which will air for a second season. Also appeared on the cover of Essence magazine's May 2015 Game Changers issue alongside Shonda Rhimes, Ava DuVernay, Debbie Allen, and Mara Brock Akil. In her work, Issa Rae has continually expressed a desire for more people of color to work in production behind the scenes in order to make a lasting impact in the television industry. At a glance, our two keynote speakers appear to come from very distinct walks of life. But a closer look reveals the work they each dedicate their lives to exemplifies the power of narrative and a commitment to drawing attention to stories often ignored by those in positions of power. Their work shows us that, in part, the sound of change comes by giving a voice to the voiceless and providing a platform for those who don't always have a seat at the table, so they may have a chance to be seen, heard, and understood. Everyone, please join me in giving a warm round of applause for the dynamic and innovative Issa Rae and welcoming Amy Goodman back to the stage.
And I get the honor of asking Issa Rae questions, but also with help from you, because questions have been submitted. Well, you just heard, among other things, that Issa was on the cover of Essence as a game changer. And I don't know about you, but I want to know how she became this remarkable woman that she is. Issa, we'll start off, just give us a little bit of your biography before we get to Awkward Black Girl. Tell us about your family, where you grew up, how you ended up doing these webisodes that broke through the world and touched so many people.
Well, first of all, it's an honor to just even talk to you. You know, I've been a fan, and I used to listen to you on my commute to my passionless job. Starting in 2008, 2009. So to be here talking to you is just a really full circle experience. And I grew up in LA. I was born and primarily raised in LA. Anybody from LA? I wanted to come out to YG's F Donald Trump, but I felt like that wasn't very kingly. But I grew up there. My dad felt like my family didn't have enough discipline. My brother specifically, and was like, we're moving to Senegal, where he's from. So, what? Is there a Senegalese person? Okay, girl, knock it up. And so, spent some time there, just living with family in West Africa, in Senegal, and then my dad tried to start a hospital there, and the government, messed him up. They had some mini Trumps over there, and so lost all his money, and then he decided to start over in LA, and my mom, he moved our family to Maryland, so I grew up there for 5 years and lived. I went to predominantly white schools and kind of felt out of place, but at home I always felt like, I'm the only black girl here. I'm one of 2 black kids here. And by the time I moved back to Los Angeles in middle school, I went to a predominantly black high school and just didn't really fit in. And a lot of those experiences I've mined for my work now. And a lot of my work now focuses on just those feelings of being out of place and feeling uncomfortable and feeling, awkward and insecure, which happen to be 2 shows that I've done.
So you're talking to a largely college audience, so can you just touch on your college years, how you got through them?
I did go to college. I forgot about that. I went to college. I went to Stanford University, and...
Are you all Stanford graduates?
Word? Yes. Okay, girl, go Cards. So yeah, that experience was just absolutely instrumental in terms of, I would say, jump-starting my career. A lot of students at Stanford were primarily focused on like human biology, engineering, political science, and that was supposed to be my field, but I just was drawn to writing and directing. And so my freshman year, I was cast by, I want to say she was a senior or she was a junior, but she threw her own hip opera. And, I was looking at some of the plays that our school threw, or put on, but they were predominantly white. And, a lot of the leads weren't played by people of color. And so here she was taking a story into her own hands, and she created this production from scratch and wrote, produced, directed it, acted in it, and cast me, in addition to some of my other friends in it. And it was just
sort of phenomenal. Like an early Hamilton.
Basically, yeah, she was, shout out to her, doing it before Lynn did it. And so I was very much influenced by her, and, the next year she didn't put on a play, and so, I was like, I have an opportunity. So I adapted Spike Lee's School Days, which really, resonated with me at the time, just in terms of the themes that he presented and being at oddly enough, a predominantly white institution, and School Days was set in at a historically black college, but a lot of the themes overlap, and so I threw that, I put that on, I produced, directed, and adapted it for the stage, and continued to do that throughout my college run. And because there weren't a lot of students majoring in art or pursuing the arts at Stanford, there was a camera in the library that was always available. So I would check that library out, and on the side I would do like these short, stupid projects. You know, I created my first web series in 2007 just because I was trying to procrastinate not writing a paper, or writing a paper, and
It was called
Dorm Diaries, and it was about what it was like to be black at Stanford. And I uploaded it to YouTube, and, you know, it caught around our own campus, and then it started to spread to other college campuses like Duke and Harvard, and people in Georgetown, and people were like, this is my college experience too. And for me, that was like a moment, I call it my light bulb moment, where I was like, wow, I'm writing on the side, and I'm trying to break in traditionally, as I was. You know, I was entering contests. I entered a Sundance competition with a friend, and we ended up being rejected. And so to have this direct access to an audience that was looking at my work, you know, when I was, 21, was insane to me. That always stuck with me.
How did the university respond to your version to you talking about your life there?
They didn't. The administration didn't really respond. It was, you know, as like, what could they really say, you know, about this was kind of our college experience. So it was mine from some sort of truth, but there wasn't any controversy.
And so, talk about what just exploded on the global stage, Awkward Black Girl.
Yes, so Awkward Black Girl ended up coming about, you know, I came up with the idea when I was struggling and hungry in New York, super broke, and I was like, how can I make money fast? And I was like, well, I should sell t-shirts. And so I came up, I was just sitting in my room journaling, and I came up with the phrase, I'm awkward, period, and black. And I was like, oh, that defines me. One of those things I knew the whole time, but one of those things, you know, just I just realized, and that feels like it seems like an identity that hasn't really been explored in a lot of the television shows that I watch, a lot of the films that I've seen. And so, yeah, my first inclination was like, I'm going to put these on a t-shirt and sell these and make little animated web shorts to try to sell these. And then I was like, animation, I don't have money. And then I just gave up on the idea. There was a catch-22 situation going on. And so then in 2011, as I produced, in 2009 I produced another web series of a show about my brother and his rap group. It was a mockumentary of them trying to make it in the music industry in LA. And as I was building that audience, I started to take web series way more seriously in terms of releasing them every Monday at 10 a.m. I would, you know, turn down plans to edit. You know, my friends would be like, you know, do you want to hang out on Taco Tuesday? And I'd be like, oh, I have to do my job. I got to edit. And they'd be like, you don't have a job. You can go. But I mean, that for me was, you know, I was treating my passion like a job. And
but how did you do it? How did you get the actors? I mean, how did you do the whole thing?
They were like, you know, my brother and his friends, and so they kind of had to show up, and it was good for them too because it got them exposure. And then I would put out ads on Craigslist for actors. I didn't really know about like Actors Access or have the money to be able to, you know, pay people at the time. But yeah, also being in LA really helps because there are a lot of people who are constantly trying. Like, here's my headshot, here's my resume. So that helped. And during that time of just creating content constantly and consistently, I decided to revisit doing this idea, Awkward Black Girl, that I had, and I wanted to cast a friend from D.C. who I'd worked with in Dorm Diaries. And when I came up with the idea in New York, it was convenient. She was like, yeah, I'll commute to D.C. But when I hit her up when I was in L.A., you know, a couple of years later, I was like, hey, I had this role for you. Are you still interested in playing? And she was like, girl, I'm a lawyer. I can't do that. But good luck. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I felt like I was running out of time and was just like, you know what, I feel like I can play this part and just put myself in it and ask my best friend, who's actually here with me today, to record it. And another friend from Stanford who was a dancer trying to transition into acting to play my love interest or non-love interest, and uploaded it, edited it, and uploaded it, and the rest is history why I'm here.
So how long did you do that for?
How long did I do it for? I did it for 2 years. Yeah, 2.5 years.
And how did Insecure happen?
Insecure came about because of that series. You know, I had an opportunity to, in our second season, work with Pharrell Williams. He funded our second season via his I Am Mother venture. And because of that, it got a lot more attention. And Rolling Stone and the New York Times reviewed like our first episode. And so from there, Shonda Rhimes and Shonda Land reached out to say, hey, do you have any ideas for us? And I pitched them a television show called I Hate LA Dudes, and that was entirely factual. And they were like, oh my gosh, we hate LA men too. And we talked for 2 hours about it, and in that process, I learned just about like honing my voice and about speaking up, you know, just because I was so grateful for the opportunity, but a little too eager and you know, wasn't able to properly navigate notes. Like, the Shondaland was great about hand-holding, holding my hand throughout the process, just because I'd never written for television before, and they couldn't be any better in terms of leading me along the way. But in terms of navigating network notes and studio notes, I was very much a yes woman. Like, yeah, I'll make it work. Okay, that doesn't really make sense, but I'll make it work because this is my only opportunity. And so, when it came time to turn in a draft, it just felt voiceless. It didn't feel like my own. And, you know, they passed on the project, and I was devastated. And I felt like I had blown my one shot. And then a month later, HBO called and said, hey, we heard that you're free. Do you have any ideas for us? And I called my friends and had a celebration that day. We didn't even have a job, but was like, y'all, HBO called. It's on. And after pitching the show to them, they bought it in the room, and then I needed, again, I had never written a show or run a writer's room before, and so my management company and, you know, HBO, they said you should meet with other people to see if anybody would be able to run your room with you and produce the show with you, and they introduced me to Larry Wilmore, and they were like, if you like him, great. He's outstanding. And if you don't, we'll just move on. And so we met and we just clicked immediately. And I credit him with really helping to solidify my voice, you know.
So, I mean, your path to success paved with both successes and failures. And it's so important, this part about the failure and how you parlay that into success, and you become the first African-American woman to helm an HBO series, and now it's going into its second season.
Yes. Home with me. This is
talk about directing, writing, and playing you. I mean, when you were back here, you were saying, "Oh, it's the writing that I love."
I do. I love the writing the most, and I have not taken on the directing, at least for Insecure directing. The directing is primarily done by the amazing Melina Matsoukas, but she's outstanding, and she knows Beyonce, guys. Come on. But it can be overwhelming at times just because, you know, I'm responsible for, like, if the show isn't successful, if people don't like it, you know, it's only on me. And that's where it gets overwhelming. Like, I can sink my own ship. And so there's definitely a lot of pressure to maintain the vision moving forward. But at the same time, I understand that I'm extremely blessed and so excited to be able to just have this opportunity to create with people I love and respect and admire. And for me, it's been opening so many doors for people around me and people who I've met along the way, people I've worked with since Awkward Black Girl, since, I did my other show, Fly Guys, and I just see it as a ticket to continue to produce with other creators of color, which is what we're doing currently. And I have an opportunity with HBO, currently with a first look deal where we're producing. They've basically given me access to produce content in the same way that I do on my YouTube channel, but for them. And so we're currently developing a half hour with another creative writer of color that I'm really, really excited about.
So there are a lot of questions that people submitted. Among them, how do you use your work or plan to use it to push back one-sizeism in the entertainment industry, especially toward actresses?
One-sizeism? I tend to cast real people. I think in watching a lot of my productions, you'll see that. I really do. I literally tap into people that I know because, one, in the past I didn't have a choice. I was just like, hey girl, I know you got a public health job, but can you be in there? Can you play this disgusting role of Jeremy Patty? Or, and so I don't think that there's an industry. I acknowledge that there's an industry standard of beauty, but it's not reflected in my own work. Like I tend to try to push up against what's considered classically beautiful and what's considered attractive by Hollywood standards.
Another question is, what has your natural hair journey been like? Someone asked.
Rocky. It's been full of experiments. Thank you, girl. Thank you. You see all this kitchen in the back. I'm sorry, this all in the back. It's been a journey. I've had to grow to love my natural hair for sure. I think, when I was in high school, tried to hide it constantly and. Because, perms and presses were in, and my mom was always like, I would get you a perm or press, but your hair's too thin to do that. And I'd be like, Mom, what do you know? And I remember taking a stand and being like, Mom, I'm going to get this perm. I'm 12 and you can't tell me anything. And she was like, you do not need to do it because your hair is going to fall out. And I did it anyway, and my hair fell out. And my mom was like, that's what your bald-headed ass gets. But after that journey, and I cut off all my hair post-college, and that really, I feel like, changed my life for the better, just in terms of embracing who I was. And I felt like the weight that we put on our hair is just so, it's kind of ridiculous. And for me, it allowed me and afforded me a freedom and a newfound confidence. And, now I love my hair. And I work with a great natural hairstylist. Shout out to Felicia Leatherwood, who does amazing styles with all lengths of hair, whether your hair is this long or, longer.
Can you talk about what it meant to be nominated for a Golden Globe?
It was absolutely surreal. I remember getting the call. It was like 5 a.m, obviously, because the East Coast announces it first. And I remember getting a call at like 5:30 and just ignoring it because I was like, it's wait. And then, my phone was blowing up and, looked up the news and saw that I was nominated. And it was a bittersweet moment for me because I was like, it's just me. And it realized, just to know how many people work on this show and how many people put so much, blood, sweat, and tears. No blood, let's be real, but just sweat and tears into the project. But, it's just, I was talking to Melina about it, just like, I wish it were all of us. And she was just like, girl, it is all of us. This is you're the show, and that, in a sense, made me feel better about it. But it was just such an honor to just even be included among the company that I respect and admire so much.
And what was the experience like?
The experience, I felt very out of place. I was just looking in awe of everyone. I saw Denzel walk by, but I didn't talk to him. I know, right? I just did like one of those, but it was too late. But it was just it was a surreal experience in that, everyone was extremely inclusive and very supportive. I had so many people come up and tell me that they watched the show and they loved the show and to continue to keep doing what we're doing. And so it just made me want to do more.
So I was looking at ET Online that was talking about folks behind the stage, and you were there along with Tracy Ellis Ross, who won for Blackish.
Yes.
And like her, you talked about Planned Parenthood. Mm-hmm. This was a very political Golden Globe, right? You had Meryl Streep calling out the president-elect. I'm wondering your reaction in the audience when you were watching that, and then going backstage, and they quoted you as saying, talking about Planned Parenthood, they've done so much for our community, for women, for everybody. When I had questions in my adolescence, in my teenage years, when I had scares and issues, Planned Parenthood was the safest place to go, you said.
100% stand by that. I think, they've done so much work in preventative care, and just the attack on Planned Parenthood is so bewildering, especially, you and I were discussing that, especially when, the Affordable Care Act is at stake, when Obamacare is at stake. And, when I was insurance-less, that's where I went, and when I felt like I couldn't talk to my mother about certain things, that's where I went. And the idea that it could be dismantled is just absurd to me. And so listening to Meryl speak up, I just feel like she's such a responsible artist, and she's someone that, I admire and I strive to be like, just in terms of speaking out. Entertainers in the past have been just relegated to the role of entertainment, and I feel like now there's too much at stake to kind of be silent on those things. And MLK, he said our lives begin to end the day that we become silent about things that matter. And I feel like by that very definition, our president-elect is like killing us, in a sense, because nothing he says matters. Go to his Twitter account, nothing he says matters in any way, shape, or form. And what he does talk about only concerns him and his best interest. And I feel like if we're only going to provoke a sort of change by speaking up, and there's just not any room to be coy because you want to capture a mass audience. I just have no interest in being silent about something that might offend others, because I don't want their support. I don't want bigots to watch my work. I don't need them to. And for that, I admire a lot of what she said, because she called so much out and called on us to kind of put our money where our mouths are.
So the day after the inauguration, all over the country, women are marching.
Yes.
In Washington, a massive march. You're in L.A. Are you going to be going to the march?
Yeah, I'll be going in L.A., joining a couple of writers in L.A. to do the same.
What about art as resistance? How you see that, and especially today we're sitting at a university on Martin Luther King Day. Where you see politics in your work, or do you even separate it from your daily life and what you write and what you're conveying?
I love to spark conversations. I remember in college being inspired by studying the Black Arts Movement and how that was a movement for social change, and in a very real and productive way, you know. And I think now, more than ever, I think people are looking. One, we're looking for leaders, which is not, I wouldn't say lacking at all. I think there's such a strong community of leaders, especially online and even offline. But I think now people are looking to their favorite entertainers to say something and to guide them to an action point. And I think for me, I'm looking for the same, and I'm looking for a community. And, you know, I've been meeting with other community leaders just on the side to just figure out what it is that we can do and how we can influence change. And especially with these midterm elections, we're seeing now that is the closest that's the closest time to actually affect any real change in terms of electing the officials that we want to elect, and to encourage people to go out and vote when it actually matters, because this man has control of the House and the Senate, and you're seeing things pass at an alarming rate in record time, and that's not going to change if you're not going to get out and go vote again. So, I mean, I think I don't ever want to be didactic in my own work, but we're always going to promote conversations, and especially now, we just feel like a lot of our storylines will address how we talk with our friends, amongst our friends. I think even I have a group chat with friends where we talk about, you know, everything from pop culture to things that affect us from day to day. And one of the things that on a particular day affected me was the death of Alton Sterling. And we were all just talking about how there was another black death, and how they were saying how they had to go to work and face their white coworkers and face the fact that they just didn't have they weren't carrying the same burden. They weren't carrying the weight of just frustration, and they could live in this bubble of oblivion, of willful oblivion. And so we were just talking about our feelings and wishing that we could do something, and, you know, and it ended up starting a fund for his family. And that, for me, was just a tiny thing that we could do, that we could use our platform to do, and to show, like, hey, this is a small token. We can raise money for his kids, and so many people reached out, so many people helped, that we ended up raising like over $700,000 for his kids. And I think people are just looking for actionable steps. I think people are ready and willing to help. They just want to know how, and they want to know the answers. And a lot of that work is just being done through social media.
As you go to bigger stages, do you feel more constrained about what you can do, like from when you were doing Awkward Black Girl to doing Insecure, for example? Are things you can't do that you could do first?
Because of this specific
expressing
platform?
Things.
Well, I used to talk a lot of shit, and that's the only thing that I feel like I've held back on. I kind of don't want to anymore. I'm way more careful with my words, but that just comes from, you know, getting older and hopefully wiser, and just being careful about what I choose to speak up about. But other than that, no, I feel like I have more opportunities to say things. I just want to say the right things. That's it.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel you have a larger stage to speak out, but in your art, in the Insecure, have you gotten into situations where they say, we don't want you to go there?
Absolutely not, no. I think, if anything, they encourage it. And that's what I love about that particular. I've always wanted to be on a network like HBO, and HBO itself, just because they are very raw, and they're very authentic. They support authenticity in a way that kind of mirrors the internet. You know, I think nothing will ever top being able to just, you know, create something from scratch, put it out, and have instant feedback. Nothing will top that. And if anything, that's the only that's the biggest thing separating, creating work online and creating work for a network is just the time. But other than that, I feel like I have full creative freedom to broach any subject.
Who have you been most inspired by?
Ava DuVernay, Shonda Rhimes, Mara Brockett Keel, Gina Prince Bythewood, Debbie Allen. I just have so many black women inspire me. Like I really do just daily find new women to be awestruck by and inspired by. And they just mean so much to me. I like to model myself and my career based off of, obviously women who I look up to and who constantly challenge obstacles and who do the unthinkable and who do the unexpected. And, I consider myself an impulsive person, and so inspiration for me comes, in doses everywhere.
Ava DuVernay just did this amazing documentary, 13th.
Yes.
Which is up for an Oscar. And of course the hashtag Oscars So White was coined when she wasn't nominated as director of Selma, even though the film was for the film Selma. What it means to have those women and the openings and what you're trying to do now. I mean, you're talking here, it's not quite to the next generation, you're just beyond 30. But what you say to people here who are experimenting, who are trying to find their way and express themselves?
To look next to you and look for people who you feel like are as passionate as you are, who think the way that you do, who don't think the way that you do, who are better at things where you find yourself weak, and work with those people, collaborate with those people.
It fits with this question that someone asked: how can young black women learn more about creating positive media content as opposed to just consuming what's projected?
Ooh. There's too many positive examples around me. I think that's what spurred me into action, is just watching, being in college. I think, I want to say Flavor of Love was super popular. Either Flavor of Love or I Love New York. And I remember seeing those women and those images on screen and just being so irritated by the representation and knowing that this was being seen potentially worldwide and not having alternative images of black women on television. So I was like, this is the only image that people are seeing of black women, and it is, I was watching an episode about one contestant who, I talk about this all the time, who defecated on the floor because she was, she had to use the restroom, and these producers, these manipulative reality show producers in some cases were just like, no, just hold it. We're about to do whatever his equivalent of the rose giving ceremony was. I think he gives them clocks. And they were like, just hold it. And so she held it for as long as she could, and then she ended up pooing on the floor on this television show, and they aired it, and then she still stayed. He didn't eliminate her, and it was just like it was the most disgusting image, and I felt bad for her, because I was like, this is the only means that she feels like she can, promote herself, and it's humiliating, but what else is out there? And so for me, I felt like I had to create what I wanted to see at the end of the day. And another thing is that I didn't know any women in my circle who were constantly fighting, and like we see in these shows. So many of the women in my social circles were supportive and are supportive and are amazing and are ambitious and do so much, and that's what I wanted to see reflected. And so my advice is to just look into your circle and project what's real to you, and that's the most authentic and truthful type of work you can put out there.
What is your process of writing? How do you most focus?
I need to leave the house. If I stay home, I'll start, organizing my iTunes library, folding scarves, so I need to leave, and I try not to force it, I will go out and people watch. If I have a writer's block, I will go and try to have an adventure, I like to put myself in uncomfortable situations because I feel like that's where a lot of my ideas come from. I feel like that's where I thrive, and then I will let an idea sort of marinate and then just sit down and isolate myself to write it.
Your next project?
My next project, I have a lot of different projects that I'm working on. I'm writing a film, I'm writing I guess some more things that I can't talk about, but I'm collaborating, as mentioned, with other writer producers. But I just want to explore every medium that I can, and that's what I'm doing. I have the luxury of being able to do that.
Well, since we have to wrap up on this Martin Luther King Day, your message to people here and to people who are watching on the live stream, to young women, to young men, to older folks, about expressing yourself, finding your place in the world, and what you want to accomplish now.
For me, I just want to continue being authentic. I want to come from a place of truth always. I want to make a difference in a way that's, long-lasting and that is impactful. When I think about who has influenced me in my youth and who I've been able to look to as examples, I want to be able to do the same thing, just via art. And my appreciation for artists who have, extended beyond their specific medium to help the masses and to really enforce a greater change. Just that's what appeals to me most, and I'm trying to find my way of doing that. And it's a journey, but I just really feel now more than ever dedicated to doing that.
What effect did the first African American family in the White House have on you for the past 8 years, and then where you see us headed now?
Obviously I remember exactly where I was. I was still struggling in New York when I saw this beautiful family take the stage and accept the first family presidency, however you say that. What is the proper noun for just the first family? To just see this man, exceed all expectations was incredibly inspiring. And I think I was just talking about this with a musician who was saying that he feels like his work, because he doesn't necessarily do the same type of music that's currently popular. Like trap music currently is like pop music to a degree, and he likes to have sort of a message in his work and talk about things that matter to him. And he was like, that kind of stuff isn't really popular anymore. And I had a theory that because I feel like this presidency has encouraged black people to flourish. Like, we can do so much, and it's encouraged art, it's encouraged politics. It's encouraged just so many facets of life, and I do feel like there's been a celebration period to a degree, but at the same time, there've just been so many other issues that have kind of been swept under the rug that we've ignored. There's been a rise of hate as a result of this presidency that we've seen bubble up and is the current cause, I would say, of this incoming presidency. And that is just heartbreaking to know that, I saw someone say that the man who was the first black president is being replaced by a man who's been endorsed by the KKK, basically. And so to know that we're entering a time of almost normalized hate is so scary to me. And I can only hope, which is the message of this outgoing president, that we can band together and we can block and figure this out in the best way possible. And again, I want to make that happen through my own work, but I know that it's going to take more than that.
Issa Rae, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you, Amy.
So did you like that? Please join me again in thanking our keynote speakers, both Amy Goodman and Issa Rae. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce Dean Scott DeRue, who will come and provide our MLK Day charge and then introduce our closing performance. Scott DeRue is the Stephen M. Ross Professor and the Edward J. Fry Dean of the Stephen M. Ross School of Business. Please welcome to the stage Scott DeRue.
Rob, thank you for that introduction, but even more importantly, thank you for your warmth, your wisdom, and your unwavering commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion at the University of Michigan. Let's all give Rob a round of applause. It is truly an honor to share the stage with people like Amy and Issa, who I believe are icons of our modern-day civil rights movement, a movement that will and must continue. So let's give them another round of applause as well. It is truly an honor to be here today in this moment of togetherness and to celebrate the legacy of Dr. King. You see, like Dr. King, I believe, as I'm sure all of you do as well, that it is our privilege and our responsibility to bring people together and give voice to those that are traditionally not heard. I believe, like Dr. King, that it is our privilege and our responsibility to listen to and seek to understand those voices, their perspectives, especially those perspectives that differ from our own. Because that's when we learn, that's when we grow, that's when we progress as a society. Like Dr. King, I believe it is our privilege to live in a diverse world and our responsibility to embrace that diversity, to create a better world for all. Indeed, our diversity is our greatest strength. but only when and only if we create an inclusive community and equity for all. Make no mistake, like any community, like any organization, we are not perfect, but we strive to be. And to me, it's that unwavering commitment that is the Michigan difference. And I am extremely proud to be part of this community because of that unwavering commitment. And I'm proud to be on that journey with you. And now I have the distinct honor, the distinct pleasure of introducing our final performance of the morning, the Syncopated Ladies. Founded by Chloe Arnold, who was discovered in Washington, D.C. at an early age, who has now gone on around the world and shared her art with people all around the globe. The Syncopated Ladies, you may have seen their recent tribute to Prince, or their cover of Beyonce's Formation, both of which achieved viral status. Right? Clearly you have seen. The Syncopated Ladies, you may have seen them on ABC's Good Morning America. You may have seen them on Fox's So You Can Think You Think You Can Dance, where they won their dance crew battle. You may have seen their live performances as far as Dubai, the Howard Theater in Washington, D.C., New York City, or just last night, Dallas. And now, at Hill Auditorium at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan. They are going to share with us their performance of Andra Day's Rise Up. So without further ado, please welcome to the stage the Syncopated Ladies.
Broken down and tired of living life on the merry-go-round, and you can't find a fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out.
Now is the time for all of us to stand up and say enough is enough.
Walk it out and
Less than 100 years ago, women did not have the right to vote. If you were black, white, Mexican, Asian, Muslim, educated, poor, or rich, if you were a woman, it did not matter.
And I rise up, I like the waves, I rise up, in spite of the ache, I rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again.
We came to thrive, we came to get educated, we came to be entrepreneurs, we came to contribute.
Human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights once and for all.
And for that we have each other, and for that we have each other.
With that kind of obstacle, and you still rise, give them a sense of distance from where they are now, that they can go the distance. Even if you don't have the answers, give them hope.
I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I will rise 1,000 times again.
still feel the warmth all the way over here. Well, we're about at that time. I hope you enjoyed today's program as much as I did. Please join me in thanking all of today's program participants for sharing with us today. Please thank. This year's symposium was co-sponsored by the University of Michigan Bicentennial Office and the Ross School of Business with support from the William K. McAnally Fund. Please join me in thanking them for their support. Also join me in thanking the Office of Academic Multicultural Initiatives for providing major administrative support to the committee and the planning process. OAMI, thank you. This year, as always, the MLK Symposium was organized by the MLK Planning Committee, which is made up of a group of dedicated staff and faculty from across the university. Would members of the Planning Committee please stand? Please join me in recognizing these individuals for the countless hours of tireless work and dedication that they have given to make this happen. Finally, I'd like to bring out on stage our two symposium coordinators, Loomis Hilaire and Mary Taylor. These two individuals, along with the others that I named, are the reason that we are able to enjoy this wonderful program today, as well as to be able to coordinate the many, many other events that are here on campus. I just personally want to thank them for all the hard work that they've been doing over many years. Believe it or not, this process will start very, very soon for next year, so get some rest. But thank you very much. I hope that you would agree with me that today's program is in keeping with the celebratory spirit of Reverend King's birthday, as well as the celebratory spirit that went in making this birthday a federally recognized holiday. I was fortunate enough to be a student back at Howard University so many years ago. Howard in the house? When we had a series of marches on the Capitol to make this birthday a national holiday. And seeing literally thousands of folks walking and braving the cold of D.C. in January and listening to Stevie Wonder and many other illustrious civil rights advocates making the case for this holiday is one of the things that has shaped my life. I was also fortunate enough to be here back at the very first King holiday celebration at the University of Michigan, and feeling and experiencing that feeling of celebration, camaraderie, and also a sense that there was still work to be done. I hope the content of today's program instills both that celebratory spirit as well as an understanding that there is still work to be done. I hope today's program inspires each and every one of us to do our part, no more, but definitely no less. To do our part to make this university, this country, and this world a better place. If we do that, there is absolutely no doubt that we will succeed. So thank you all for coming this morning. Once again, I invite you to continue to participate in our many other events. If you have questions about those events, please either look at your program or also look at the MLK Celebration website. So I hope to see you again this time next year. And thank you, good afternoon, and happy MLK Day.